You guys have asked me to get Dr. Paul Cottrell back on the channel. His first video just rose above 100,000 views, and we discussed whether the virus was bioengineered. And I already did videos previously on the weapons lab, the level 4 weapons lab out of Wuhan. Now, the issue is becoming more contentious worldwide. I just want to give a quick disclaimer. People are dying on one extreme, and people are, understandably upset and grieving. And on the other extreme, we've got people saying it's a hoax. It's just all about the government locking the world down and becoming a totalitarian society. Now, on my channel, I've tried to interview people who have got a range of views on the subject. If that's a viewpoint you don't agree with, that's fair enough. But reading philosophy in prison, all the books I read and debate and argumentation, my belief is that you have to look at the full range of views to get a comprehensible grip on a subject. Dogmatism is the enemy of the truth. So if you don't agree with one of my podcast guests, don't shoot the interviewer. I'm just trying to get you this range of views. And what Paul said the first time around has really resonated with a lot of people. If you didn't see part one, it is in the description box below this video. So, have you seen, Paul, thanks for coming back, and have you seen this Bill Gates discussion with the TED guy on webcam that was posted recently?
Yes, I did. You're talking about the little bit over an hour interview. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I did see that. I did see that.
What are your thoughts on that and the 201 business that everybody's asking about?
Well, he was focusing on that TED video that you're mentioning on multiple testing, frequent testing, a lockdown. Here we call it shelter in place. He was, stating that if we don't do a lot of testing, if we don't have home kits and stuff like this, that we won't be able to dampen the curve is a term that a lot of people are using, where you have that epidemiological curve will spike, and if it spikes over a certain threshold, then you actually have a breakdown in healthcare. If you dampen the curve below a certain threshold, then the healthcare system within that society can manage it. So that's what we've been trying to do in New York, is actually through shelter in place, dampen the curve, and hopefully that will prevent a breakdown in healthcare, because people need to understand that healthcare is 21st century until you don't have the doctors and nurses and the supplies to provide the 21st century healthcare. When that happens, if that breaks down, it's very similar to when you lose your lights, when you lose electricity. You snap right into the 17th century very quickly. So dampening this curve, or what Steve Bannon has been stating on his show on War Room, and I like the term more, smash the curve. Be aggressive with this at the very beginning. Smash that curve, because if you don't, what will happen is there'll be more economic damage. More civil liberties will be eroded. This will carry through the population more. So, but that particular video that you're mentioning with Bill Gates, he's sitting in his chair. He's got this really beautiful view of the city, or wherever. I guess it's in Seattle. And it looks like he's on a second or third floor in a building. And, he's got these wide open windows and everything's spacious, and he's very calm and all this. But, he really focused on testing, which I think, and he's mentioned on his particular foundation that his foundation is helping with the testing. His foundation is helping with taking groups of therapeutics that might help and narrowing it down for clinical trials. And then also he's working on a vaccine. So there is, and he's been, telling people this for a while now. So I think that his foundation is probably going to be very instrumental in pushing a vaccine program. because there's so much economic damage that's taking place in the world that governments will force vaccinations. Now, some people will just take it. Others will be very, very skeptical. I am skeptical on these new vaccine platforms. I don't think there's enough testing that's taking place long term. What does it mean 10 years down the road when you're using these messenger RNA platforms? They may be safe, they may not be. There's a lot of vaccines that are not safe. There's a lot of vaccines that are very beneficial. So I'm not like pro-vax or anti-vax. I'm kind of like in the middle. I want safe vaccines, and I don't want too many of them. So, but there is an agenda that he's pushing, and he's been he's been on CNN and some of the other mainstream networks, mainstream media networks, pushing this multiple testing scenario. But to his credit in terms of evidence, there seems to be some evidence that if you do a lot of testing, you can dampen this curve below a certain threshold. And that's what seems to have happened in Korea. Korea's numbers, the last I looked, were around 9,000 or so in terms of confirmed cases. But, they say, okay, Korea's a country, so therefore the numbers can be really dampened in the United States. Well, Korea is the size of a state in the United States. So people have to keep context in mind here. It's not just absolute numbers and, one country to another country. There are different variables, population densities, ethnicities, comorbidities. There's a lot of different variables that go along with this. That's why I was stating, I think on your show, that, the comorbidity, the health of many individuals in the United States and North America, including Canada, it's not that good. There's a lot of diabetes. There's a lot of heart disease. There's a lot of other issues that COVID-19 can exacerbate and cause, a lot of complications. And a lot of people need to think about that.
So Gates was talking about everybody in the world having some sort of identity card or maybe tracked by a microchip to state whether they had the vaccine or they had the virus, so they could find out the people who were still presenting a risk. What, do you think that is just a call for the erosion of civil liberties worldwide?
Yes, I think this is a component of what I call the Biopatriot Act. So as there's economic disruption, there's an incentive, quote, an incentive to have policies and procedures where you can prove that you do not have an infection, or you can prove that you've been inoculated, so you can be given status to work. This is what was really happening, is we're giving status to work. So this falls in line with that ID 2020 concept, where people need to be tagged and all this. Now, here's the problem: is that there's most likely going to be multiple waves of this. No one really knows for sure if the secondary and tertiary wave will be as bad, worse, or better than what we're currently going through. We just don't know. Now, there's so many moving pieces. If the hydroxychloroquine works with Z-Pak, for a lot of people that might work. I don't think it'll work for everybody, because I've been talking to doctors and they're having patients that it's not working for. So, but it may work for a lot of people. The quicker we can dampen the curve, the less chance that we're going to have our civil liberties eroded. So this is why I like the idea, smash the curve. Okay, a lot of people that are listening to this, they're going to say, okay, yes, there is some sort of global agenda. Yes, this is happening. That there's going to be some form of Biopatriot Act, forced vaccinations, and ID. But the quicker you smash the curve, the less powerful that Biopatriot Act will happen. Okay, but people are saying, oh, don't shelter in place. Well, this is the problem that people don't understand is that you need to shelter in place to smash the curve to prevent the civil liberties from being eroded. See, when they don't shelter in place, they continue the spread that continues the economic damage that gives the incentive to be ID'd. See? So smashing the curve is really important to save our civil liberties. But you have individuals out there that's saying, this is not that bad. Don't worry about, don't shelter in place. 14 days is good enough. And a lot of people don't understand statistics. But if you look at a bell-shaped curve, there are standard deviations. There's a 1 sigma, 2 sigma, 3 sigma. So if you're in a 1 sigma of a normal distribution, that's about 66% of the population. 2 sigma is 95, 3 sigma is 99.5. Okay, if you have a disease that they're saying that majority of the people would be okay, majority. Now again, 66% is majority. To shelter in place for 14 days, you're only getting 66% of the people not to be infected. There's a chance, there's a 33% chance of still passing the infection on. So that's why the 14-day shelter in place doesn't work. It's only 1 sigma. If you do 2 sigma, then 95% would be not infected. You still have a 5%. So we have to get to 2 or 3 sigma, and that's either 30 days or 40-day shelter in place. And people need to realize that, because my concern here is that if people only shelter in place for 14 days, you're still going to have a high probability of ID 2020, forced vaccinations, and work permit. Basically, what he was prescribing in that video was a work permit.
Yeah, and in my university degree, I did a lot of stats and bell curves and calculus, business studies, economics for that application. And when the numbers started to come out about this virus, I started to put the videos up saying that the rates of growth and the contagion was such that the comparison to flu, people were saying it's no big deal because only a couple hundred people have died. Flu kills way more. But looking at the stats then, so globally, flu kills about 500,000 people a year. And presently, we've got 3,000 to 4,000 a day dying from the virus. So the flu kill rate, 42,000 per month, 1,400 a day. We've got 3 times that now getting killed by the virus on a daily rate. 3 times more people are dying per day presently than die from flu. So those original people who are saying it was less harmful than the flu were not perceiving the growth rate. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. But the problem here is that a lot of people need to look at context. All right, so if, like in the United States, I don't know worldwide, but in terms of the United States, we have about 50 to 60,000 deaths from flu annually. And it's anywhere, depending on the flu season, anywhere from 15 million to as much as 25 to 40 million people that are infected with the flu with varying degrees of severity. Okay? If you just look at it from a standard deaths versus total infected, all right, that's your chances of getting dying. That's the chances of dying from the flu if you contract it, all right. You have a higher chance of dying with this SARS-CoV-2 when you take the number of people that have died divided by the current infected. So, but here, they don't test for flu as aggressively as we're testing for SARS-CoV-2, all right? And we still have a higher death rate, all right? When you actually test the number of people that actually, had the flu, it's going to be more than probably 25 or 50 million in the United States. That will bring the number down even farther in terms of, the death rate. So the point that I'm making here is that because we're doing such aggressive testing, we're going to start realizing that this is a very deadly disease, especially for the elderly, and that the comorbidities are a big factor in the outcome of the patient. Uh, People say that this is just the flu is crazy. People that say that the flu is more deadly, and they've been saying this on mainstream media a lot. The flu is more deadly because there's more people that die from it annually. Well, first of all, we're in the United States. We're only in the second month of this, right? And I'm in the middle of New York. This is the hot zone in the United States. At first I thought the hot zone would actually be California, but it's not. It's actually New York City. Okay, 4 blocks away. 4 blocks away. You've been to New York City, I'm assuming.
No, I never got out that far. I went to
Okay,
Florida. Yeah.
okay. So New York's blocks are very small. All right, in Manhattan. So literally, just a quick walk down 2 streets. All right. In my backyard is a morgue that they set up at Presbyterian Hospital in Lower Manhattan, outside in the back, one of the side streets that the hospital is at. So they didn't set the morgue in the front area of the hospital. That makes sense, right? Because people are walking in. But near the back area, there is a tent, and there is a cooling trailer that's connected to the tent. All right, for the dead bodies. All right, that gets real, and that's in my backyard. All right, they have several of these in New York. All right, another one is at Belleville, or Bellevue, around 34th Street and First Ave, around that area. Okay, so this is very visceral. All right, very, very real, very, so people think that this is not happening is crazy. It is happening. And the last I looked last night, New York City alone had over 700 people that died, and it's going to get a lot worse. So that's just looking at the stats. But when you look at the mechanism, and we've talked about this where there's multiple receptors, when you look at the biochemical mechanisms that are happening with this spike protein, it's worrisome. And then if you take a look at the genomic level, seeing that it was bioengineered, flus are not bioengineered. All right? This is bioengineered. And there's a lot of evidence that's starting to mount that there were 2 lines that were developed, a scientific line and a weapons line. We don't know which one leaked out, okay? And there's some evidence to state, and again, it's still a working hypothesis, but there's some evidence to state that Wuhan virus was the weapons line because of the HIV homology has a stronger affinity to the ACE2 receptor and other receptors that are tied to the immune system, like CD299 and CD209, that the RATG13 line doesn't have as much of an affinity towards. So it might have been that the RATG13 line was actually the scientific line. And then there was a bifurcation that took place around 2015 that potentially could have been the weapons line. But the bottom line is this: it was bioengineered, and it's much more. It was designed to kill. Let me repeat that. It was designed to kill, independent if it was scientific or weapon. So this is not the regular flu. So, and we're in a moving target. There's a moving target here. We don't know what the real death rate is. Hopefully it goes down. There's a lot of moving pieces. Will the therapeutics work? If the therapeutics work, then, our answers, our prayers have been answered, and that, that we have something that helps a lot of people. It won't help everybody, but it'll dampen that curve down. The social distancing, I think, originally when I was thinking about this social distancing in the United States, I didn't think that that would work as well. Um, I figured the cases would actually ramp up actually quicker than they are. Um, but I think the social distancing will help dampen the curve quite a bit. Because the United States, we have pockets of high population, but then we have vast amounts that are low population. And I think that might also dampen the spread of the disease in the United States.
So some people have asked me to ask you to simplify the scientific terminology. So let me just ask you a couple of quick questions.
Hmm.
Go back to the basics here. What is a virus?
All right, so a virus is not living and it's not dead. It's kind of like a zombie, right? Okay, all right. And it needs machinery in your cell to replicate. It can't replicate on its own. Bacteria can replicate on its own. It has its own machinery. So a virus has either RNA or DNA, but it doesn't have the machinery to multiply, to manufacture its proteins and all that. So it has to infect another organism, another cell, hijack its machinery, and then start its viral production, and then continue to spread. So in a lot of ways, it's a parasite. It needs a host to quote live. It's really not living. It's just because it can't replicate on its own. But so it's very small, and so a cell is, let's say in comparison, a cell is this big. Okay, bacteria might be that big. A virus is super small compared to even a bacterium. So we're talking about very, very small particles that cannot be seen under a microscope. They would have to be seen under an electron microscope. It's a very, very specialized microscope. But a light microscope is you can't see a virus. So we're
What's the
talking about
dif-
something that very small, very, very small.
What's the difference between viruses and bacteria?
Okay, so bacteria have the machinery for multiplying. They have the enzymes. They have they're a much more complex organism compared to a virus. Um, so bacterium are a living organism. Viruses are not living organisms. They're particles. We call them particles, viral particles. So so and again, bacterium are larger than viruses because they have all that machinery. They have they have enzymes and cytoplasm and processes. They metabolize. They have metabolites. They produce things. They produce toxins. They have they so but you can consider them living. Now they're much smaller than let's say a human cell. Bacterium are much smaller than a human cell. Lots of bacterium could fit on a human cell, and lots of viruses could fit on a bacterium. So you can kind of see, relatively the relative size of these things.
So I read that bacteria have been around for 3.5 billion years, viruses for 1.5 billion years, humans for approximately 200,000 years. So would you say that in terms of longevity, they look at us as just like a new and novel thing, and they've got like people say cockroaches would survive a nuclear war. These things can just keep going even when humans are gone. They'll just keep going. The viruses.
Yeah, here's the thing: is that if you really look at it deeply, some viral infections help evolution along. That they actually get integrated in the genome and they actually help evolution. Um, there are times when there's like high, you see these in plants where there's high radiation, high levels of radiation, UV or other radiations, what will happen is that it'll cause mutations and translocations to happen on the genome, and it actually will add genes in the plant. Now, plants can deal with this, and they don't get, quote, cancers. But when you look at a cancer cell, the genome of a cancer cell is not like our normal cell genome. It starts to break down, and pieces of one chromosome will cut off and then be pasted somewhere else. And this is happening a lot in a tumor. So it causes all this chaotic stuff that's going on in the cell that we call it cancer. But some of these rare events down the evolutionary tree help with the actual expansion of that tree, help the evolutionary process. So there's a working theory that it was actually a viral infection that helped expand, let's say, our primal brain to a more expansive brain that we have today. That's a working hypothesis. But if you look at the structure of a virus, it's very simple. It has spikes or proteins on it, right? And it has a membrane around it, a capsid, and it has DNA, okay? So if you look at a cell, a regular cell, it has a membrane, a lipid layer, and it has proteins on there, right? And it has machinery and DNA in it. So a very simplistic, it's almost like some DNA is floated up to the surface and it's been captured around, and there's an envelope of lipids with spikes, with proteins that float around. So these are like, viruses could be looked at as they're remnants of cells, remnants of bacterium, that cycle and become more viral. All right. But they could have been also primal pieces that led to. So it's not so simple as saying viruses started first. What came first, the chicken or the egg? It's kind of the problem here. Viruses come from bits and pieces of things as they were evolving, but things also used viruses to help their evolutionary process too. It's kind of like almost, bidirectional in a way. It's hard to explain it, but viruses and bacterium, yes, I mean, were around much earlier than more complex species like ourselves, but they actually have helped our evolutionary process along. And some of those one cellular organisms help the evolutionary process along for viruses.
All right, well, forgive my personification here then. In regards to the second wave, what is the decision-making process of the virus as to whether to mutate in a more lethal form? Does it think, okay, if I kill all these people off, where am I going to go next? Or does it go to a more mellow form, thinking that if I keep these people alive and assimilate with them, we can use them and manage work with them for longer?
Well, it's important to mention that viruses don't think.
Yeah.
Forgive
my personification.
But what happens is that there's a natural selection, and the power of natural selection we're seeing in place here. It doesn't want to die. All right, to give it'll find a niche and survive in that niche. It doesn't want to kill its host. So the natural selection would be to attenuate and live in that population, or get out of that population and live in another host that it's more suitable for. So So but my concern is that because of these multiple receptors, as it's losing affinity and becoming less virulent, or less lethal, it will gain function. It will gain affinity in these other receptors that I'm very concerned about, and do this pinballing that goes back and forth, back and forth. So it's very possible that the second and third wave, because of slight mutations in the S protein, they gain affinity with some of these other receptors and lose affinity with the ACE2. If that takes place, then it's possible, probably highly probable, that these secondary and tertiary waves would be as lethal, as virulent. Now, if we only were dealing with one receptor, maybe two, then you would see this, more probable that you would see the attenuation, and it would learn to live in the population and be more like the flu. I think over time, once we get past this pinballing, how long that takes, I have no idea, But once we get past the pinballing between receptors and it attenuates into the population, then we'll start to see, just the common cold. All right. The reason why, let's say, Ebola doesn't attenuate is it kills the host so fast. you know. So when people, think, well, there's not that many people that get Ebola. Well, that's because once you get it, in 10 days you're dead. You know, so the R0 value is actually relatively low. So there was this combination of being able to infect, and how long does it take to kill the host before it can jump to the next organism. So you can have a very deadly virus like Ebola, and the R0 value is not as high as what we have right now, and it just dies out. It burns out very quickly. I don't think that's going to happen here, but that's assuming a lot. That the social distancing isn't going to work, that the hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, or the Z-Pak, or other antivirals, or remdesivir, or if we have a worst case scenario where nothing works, then we have a problem. But there is some hope. There's some light out there that some of these therapeutics seem to be working for certain types of cohorts. It's not a panacea, because I'm talking to doctors that are treating COVID-19 patients, and they do mention that some of it is working for certain patients, but for other patients, it's not. And that's a whole slew of reasons why that is. Age, comorbidities, when they start seeing the doctor, what level of the disease were they in? So but it'll find a niche and eventually attenuate. I mean, most viruses do. But this was designed to be lethal, and how long it takes to attenuate and go through this pinballing between receptors is anyone's guess. So, but I think it will attenuate, but it's not going to attenuate in 2 months or 3 months. We're talking years to be like the common cold.
So there is a range of possibilities, and based on your research, just projecting out 2 years now, what would you give as a best case scenario and worst case scenario over a 2-year period, not just for the health of the people, but also in terms of the economy?
Okay, so the worst case scenario, assuming, and I've been focused more on the United States in terms of numbers, but you can extrapolate this for the world, okay? Assuming that half the population is sick, sick meaning not with COVID-19, but with other comorbidities. In the United States, and you would have about, over a 20-month period, let's say 2 years for simplicity here, you would have half the population that is infected with COVID-19 disease, all right, through these different waves. Now, you you would probably need about 27 million ICU slots, you know, because about 1/6 of those will be severe cases, and about a quarter of those, 25% of those ICU cases probably would die from complication, key word, complications to COVID-19 because of the heart disease, pulmonary issues that are not related to COVID-19, but the COVID-19 exacerbates and the death happens. So I see as worst case in the United States around 6.9 million people dying. Now that's assuming social distancing doesn't work, chloroquine doesn't work, that other antivirals don't work, remdesivir doesn't work, there's no vaccine, there's a lot. That's worst case, all right. Now, and that there is this pinballing between receptors, it doesn't attenuate, and it stays virulent. Okay, and so with the worst case scenario, you're talking 50% unemployment in the United States or more, and you're talking about the Great Depression, and it's going to take many years to get out of that because you're talking about, well, we get past this first wave, and then another wave hits, and it's just as bad to the economy, right? So the stock market, no one's going to be going back to work at any, with any, with any power, right? So, so we will have a lot of people unemployed, and world GDP will be down. Who's going to buy goods if everyone's sick, or if everyone's scared, or if everyone doesn't have a job? So, I mean, you're talking about a severe world depression, okay? That is, I think, maybe would eclipse even 1929. I didn't live through 1929, so I have no real feel of what 1929. I can read it in a book, but I don't feel it. So I know what Lehman means because I lived through it. I know what Wuhan means because I'm living through it, but I don't know what the Great Depression means. So, but I envision massive unemployment, massive, economic carnage, and you're talking about creeping socialism in pretty rapidly, and the erosion of the civil liberties that I'm very worried about with this BioPatriot Act. Now, best case scenario. Okay, so that's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is this: that we don't have a secondary and tertiary wave, and it attenuates very quickly, and that this starts to go away in the United States in around the beginning of maybe mid-June, early July, when it starts to warm up. Okay, and stock market notices that people are getting back to work. Slowly but surely, people are going back to work, and then there's this 2 or 3 year healing of the stock market. But you're still going to have high unemployment. But now you're talking about a recession, and that the central banks can pump in liquidity and manage the recovery. That the worst case scenario, I don't think there's enough central banks in heaven that can stop this from happening. Right? So or hell, depending on how you feel with the Federal Reserve. And all right, so it attenuates, and the social distancing works, and that hydroxychloroquine works, or remdesivir, and they can manage the residual cases throughout that next around 18 months, because there's going to be residual cases. All right, it's not going to just, it'll go away and it'll never come back. There's going to be residuals. Individuals are going to have, they may have it for 4 or 5 weeks. Individuals may not have gone through the first wave, but get it next fall, and have to go through treatment. So in that scenario, we're talking probably in the United States, probably around, I see about 10 million or 20 million people being infected with COVID-19 within a 20-month period, or 24-month if it's just for easy calculation here, and um, and then your ICU, you still will have the problem with the ICU. So 1/6 of those, so 20 million, 1/6 of that will be in ICU, and then a quarter, will be dead. A quarter of those will be dead. So, you're still going to have much higher numbers than we were seeing in Johns Hopkins database. I don't believe in best case scenario that we're only going to have 1 million COVID-19 cases and, a few tens of thousands that pass away in the United States. We're talking millions, even in the best case scenario, contracting COVID-19. Far majority will be relatively benign. But you're going to have that 1/6 of the population that, because of the comorbidity, 1/6 of the population of 20 million is still a lot, that will, need the ventilator, that will, be in ICU. That's not all at once. That's over, a 20-month period, 18 to 20-month period. So you're still seeing recession, a lot of people dying, and a lot of people getting sick, but a lot of people recovering too. But this idea that, we're near the peak and we're only going to see 1 million cases and 20,000 deaths in the United States. No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that for a second.
So a lot of people asking me to ask you about Event 201, but before we go there, a quick stock market question. Mm-hmm. The Dow Jones was up around 30,000. Bam, it just smashed through 22, then down to almost 18. The Fed announced their stimulus. It rallied back up to 22,000 zone. Do you think that's a dead cat bounce and it will resume going down as things peak in the first wave in America?
Yes. I think that this thing is, I focus more on the S&P 500 because there's 500 stocks. That'll give you a more diverse perspective, a good cross section of different industries. When you look at the Dow, it's not a very good proxy for the whole economy. So there is something called the cross of death that's about to happen, right? And that cross of death is when the 50-day moving average crosses the 200-day moving average and it's going down. Those algorithmic trades will force the market down further. Now, one nice thing is that we're starting to see the VIX start to go down, the VIX index. That's a risk indicator. So it was as high as 82. Lehman was 89, I think it was. So, so we've had elevated risk that was very similar to Lehman during this Wuhan crisis, right? So, and we haven't had that ever in other, financial epochs. So it's gone down to about, last I saw it was 62. I don't know what it's trading at right now, but so it spiked and it's coming down, but it's still elevated. 62 is very high, right? The market is at a point where it's looking for some clear sky. Okay, so we got to hear better results on antiviral medication working. We have to hear better results on dampening the curves around the world, because it's not just the United States, because we have global trade. But there is some light there. My concern here is that a lot of times when there's liquidity pumped into the market, there's kind of like a new surge of activity in the stock market, but then it falls again. So if there is any dead cat bounce, my dog's barking, but any dead cat bounce, then what we have is it'll come up and it'll come back down, and a lot of these algorithmic trades are going to just keep on forcing the market down, down, and down. So that's why I've been suggesting to everybody, do not have your money in the stock market, because I think at the SPY level we're gonna hit around 1700, 1750. At that point, that's around 40% drop from the high. At that point, then it needs to be reevaluated if it's going to go down further, or actually that's starting to bottom out. But until that happens, I would not get into the market. I still believe that the market will continue to fall, because you're going to epicenters like New York are not going to be healed in the next month. All right. And in the stock market, a month is forever. So once they start hearing the bad news that's happening in New York, then the market's that VIX might go up again and test the 82 level, and that market will continue to fall. So we're at a very precarious. The point is that we're at a very precarious situation in the market, and there's no way for sure that we can say that this is the time to buy back into the market. It's hard to believe, because we're just starting. People are just starting to go to unemployment insurance in the United States. People are getting laid off, and this is going to continue for a while. So I think it's going to continue to go down. Hopefully, in best case scenario, it'll be people got to realize, best case scenario is a recession. It's not going back to the way it was. Those days are gone. People think this is going to be like a real quick recovery and everything was, going to be hunky dory right after Wuhan. Those days are gone. All right. The best case scenario is managing through a recession. The question is how bad that recession is. Worst case scenario was a Great Depression.
Yeah, I've been telling people to stay on the sidelines, and if people are watching this, I post on a forum called stageanalysis.net. I'll put the link in the description box below this video. So in a typical bear market, average is about 9 months. You see multiple waves and then these huge rallies. Are you tempted to go short the SPX? I'm looking at like XPXU right now. That shot up to the mid 40s when things were really low a week or so ago. And now it's back down in the 20s, and it's like a leveraged instrument. You can, go long that and short the SPX.
Right, but here's the problem with some of these leverage products. When you have VIX at such a high level, these candles are trading very widely. There's a lot of spread in intraday trading. All right, there's a lot of volatility. So you could get shaken out very easily because you're shorting, but then there's a big rally the next day, and then you get knocked out because of your limit, your stop limits. So people need to realize that this is not like little candles that we're talking about here. We're talking big candles, and big candles mean lots of volatility, lots of risk. Even though there is a downward trend, any given day is so volatile that if you're shorting the market, you could still lose money because you have this big rally day of 900 points or 1,000 points, and then the next day you have a 900 point drop. So it's not that simple, and people need to kind of realize that if you're in the market and doing first, the average person doesn't short the market. Average person, longs the market, but we're talking about people that are more professional traders or are institutional investors, where they're managing a portfolio, and how they would manage through this crisis when they, have, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of assets, under management. But the average person should be out of the market.
Yeah, I agree entirely.
And just wait until, and just look around. It's a real simple litmus test. Are people working? Yes. If people going back to work and working and they feel somewhat stable, then it's okay to go into the market. But if a lot of your society is not working or feels very uneasy, don't be in the market. You don't need to even look at a chart. You do that simple social test, simple, sampling of your environment. And because the market is behavioral. So, I personally think that the average person should be out of the market because there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And don't try to play this like, you're going to be a hero and I'm going to try to get in right now. I suspect that it'll go down. But it doesn't mean you won't have up days. You will have up days. There'll be positive things that are mentioned in the news cycle from these government officials like Trump, where there's a stimulus package or whatever, and then the market will rally. But then you'll hear, you know what, remdesivir clinical trials found out that it causes cancer. Well, then it'll start selling off again, right? So, it's just it's too schizophrenic right now, way too schizophrenic for individuals, the average person, to get into the market and say this is a good entry point for their retirement. I just because you don't know if it is the worst case scenario and it's a depression that could last 10 years or 5 years. People don't understand this concept because we've been living high on the hog for so long. They don't understand what 10-year depression means. Lehman was bad, but roughly speaking, in terms of job loss and recovery, it was around 2 years where companies were starting to hire back again. All right, 2 years is still a long time. That was a firecracker compared to what's happening right now. All right, this is like a nuclear bomb went off. All right, and so we got to be lucky a lot in the next few months for this to be a mild recession. There's no way we're going back, quickly to pre-Wuhan days and everything is hunky-dory and, we have only 3.4% unemployment in the United States. That's, I'd be shocked. I think we're going to see very high unemployment in the next month. The next month numbers that come in, very high unemployment because these companies won't be able to keep on furloughing their employees because where's the money? How's the money coming in? They need revenues, they need cash flows to be able to pay people. But if the cash flows aren't there, how do they pay people? So they're going to be forced to go for unemployment insurance, and there's going to be taxing on all these government institutions, to pay that unemployment insurance.
Yeah, I agree entirely. So all these people that have been writing in asking for investment advice, what Paul's saying there is solid. You should be in capital preservation mode right now. The stock market is a minefield for the average person, even on a clear blue skies day. We've got a torrential downpour now. Stock market is moving 10, 20% within days. These moves often take years to occur, and we're seeing them within days. So whatever your plan is, you could get wiped out quite rapidly by the volatility. So keep that cash on the sidelines, preserve your capital. Don't be trying to play the market at this stage. We think it's going to go down a lot more. So the most common question that's coming in, Paul, is to ask you about Event 201. Are you familiar? Could you explain what it is, and could you give your opinion on that, please?
All right. So Event 201 was a simulation by Bill Gates Foundation and partially supported by Bloomberg through his foundation. His foundation actually pumps money through Johns Hopkins University. And they did a simulation. And what it was is to go over a coronavirus that infects the world and how to manage that. And they had all these different individuals. They had military, they had CEOs, they had health officials, NGOs, UN officials, whatever. So, and they were basically role playing a crisis. And how would they manage at different stages of this? I saw there's multiple videos out. I didn't see the long version. I saw the Cliff Note version, and the Cliff Note version is like 15 minutes, and it takes like highlights of each episode of this role play because it's in stages. The longer version, you see it all play out. Okay, now a lot of the things that they're mentioning are what's happening. The quarantining, the damage to the economy. They were predicting, I believe, 65 million deaths from this, coronavirus. It took place October 18th of 2019, which is strange, because the first cases seem to be popping up in China in November, possibly even late October. Then there's the Wuhan games that took place at the same time as this. And, there's this just weird coincidence. All right. I think it's too coincidental. And I think most people with, a thinking neuron, just one thinking neuron could see that there seems to be some orchestrated event that took place, some social programming, or what Noam Chomsky would say is a manufactured consensus. That we see the news, we see advertisements in such a way where we accept what they are telling us, what they want us to do. Something happens and then we respond because it's this predicted programming. It's strange, the word programming, when we, with TV. So this is a role play that has a lot of similarities to what is happening right now. Something happened similar in the UK, and that was with the underground bombings. I think it was in 2013, right?
There was a rehearsal.
Yeah, there was a rehearsal, and the same day they had an event, a terrorist event. Same thing happened with 9/11. They were doing a simulation for the military, and we literally had a terrorist attack in New York, same day. And there was a confusion, was it simulation or was it not? And that was part of the reason why the military didn't respond so quickly. So it's almost like they have a certain playbook. Like the ones, the eye in the sky, or, the ones that are the New World Order types, they have a certain playbook that they go by, and they just keep on doing the same thing over and over again. Now, why they have this playbook, or why do they, have to do this? I'm not sure. It's all speculation. But it's way too coincidental that it was a coronavirus, that it was going to be a pandemic, that was going to do huge economic damage, and they were they were suggesting martial laws and marshaling industries to try to fight this disease and all this. So you could see some of the policies that are happening right now were suggested in Event 201. But then you got to couple it with what Bill Gates is saying right now. It's like on TED Talk, right? In that interview, where you have this paper to work, the right to, this certification to work because you don't have COVID-19, which leads into, well, if it's COVID-19 and this thing's going to go around the world and around the world and around the world and attenuate, they're probably going to force a vaccine for COVID-20 in 21 and 22 and 23. And so you'll have to, I can easily see that if you institute some sort of paper policy or a digital currency, right, that you're you can't get a job or you can't go to work unless you have the vaccine, and you know, and it's tied to this digital currency. It's like it reduces your social score. Were you vaxxed? Yes. Okay, then you get 10 points for your social score. But if you weren't vaxxed, you get, a reduction of 10 points. And if you reach a certain threshold, you can't work or you can't travel, or you can easily see this. I mean, in the United States, we've been hearing cases where New Yorkers have been fleeing. And the ones that are in New York and they're fleeing to other states, they're spreading the disease or have the potential to spread the disease, so they shouldn't be fleeing. They should stay in place, shelter in place. That's what it means, shelter in place, not flee to another state. But you have police officers knocking on people's doors in certain states, like Rhode Island, where they're asking if people are housing from individuals from New York. So you have the search and seizure taking place in the United States, hunting down, quote, hunting down New Yorkers in other states to try to make sure that they're quarantined. So you can easily extrapolate that, say, well, if we don't get these vaccines, that certain people will be, quote, hunted down and not allowed to work, not allowed to travel. So it's scary. It's very scary, and this is what the Event 201 was promoting. It was promoting some sort of top-down response, and my impression is that they were promoting this one world health as part of Agenda 21, Agenda 30. There's many different components of Agenda 30, but one of those components is climate change, no borders, erosion of nationhood, and like a one health system, one currency, digital currency. That sounds like a one currency. One health sounds like a top down, a WHO policy. Erosion of borders. We were seeing, but there was cracks in the system when Brexit happened. See, I find it really odd, and a lot of people don't talk about this. A lot of this crazy stuff that's happening now with the virus happened right after Brexit became official. And it's almost like the globalists have to create so much havoc because Brexit meant nationhood. It meant that the one world agenda was not working, and a high probability that the EU would break apart. I still think the EU will break apart. But these globalists are clamoring to create an event where they're going to try to put the pieces back together and not realize that Humpty Dumpty, had a great fall, and Humpty Dumpty can't, be put back together. So, there's a lot there with Event 201. Now, I think that 9/11 event was an orchestrated event. Okay, that it happened, but it was orchestrated. Okay, that it wasn't just this random terrorist thing, and it allowed for policies to be put in place where a lot of people can make money in weapons and in war. That there would be a geopolitical play for the Middle East. In the controlling of the oil. And there was this erosion of civil liberties. There was this more top-down government in the United States, building up of a security apparatus. That's why I think that this thing that's happening in the world and in the United States is kind of like a slow 9/11. It's a biological version of 9/11. There's a Patriot Act that's coming that has these elements of forced vaccinations, digital currency or decashing, surveillance. You roll in the 5G and you can have targeting. You can surveil someone's network, not just the individual, but the 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree separation networks. and you balloon that out, you can see how big that could be for an individual. And that's all real time. 5G type capabilities allow for this. So we have this. We're living in this 1984 world now that a lot of people see happening, but I don't think enough people are acting against it. It's like it's very passive. They're letting it happen. Just like 9/11, the Patriot Act, people let it happen because they were fearful. They just let it happen. But with this, the same thing's happening. They're letting these. Not enough people in the United States called their senators to make sure that the digital currency that was written in the bill, it was struck down. But the original draft of the bill for the stimulus package from Nancy Pelosi had in it digital currency. And it was struck down, but not enough people were engaged at the citizenry level to say, no, this is never going to happen. Not that we don't like it. We need to stand up as citizens and say, we will never have this happen, because that's more forceful. So I just don't feel that the people are engaged. They see it, but they're just not. They're not reactionary enough. And that's my concern. Event 201 is happening. Will we get the case they predicted, 65 million? Maybe. Will we get a case of the worst case that I'm predicting of 165 million in just the United States, contracting it? Maybe. Maybe we'll get a best case scenario. It's all maybe. But the bottom line is we're in it, and how people, there's too many people that are not engaged enough on protecting those civil liberties or the Magna Carta, or basically the Constitution comes off of the Magna Carta, and people don't really, they don't understand the history and how these documents came about and all of the sacrifice that came about to make them. So I'm a little pessimistic in terms of people fighting for their freedoms and their constitutional rights.
So we saw gun sales spike in America as if people are bracing for civil unrest. Italy has been locked down a lot longer than us here in the UK and in the US. We're now seeing looting and civil unrest starting to occur in Italy. If people can't get a paycheck and they can't buy food, or the means of supplying food break down, what scenario could that cause in the other countries of the world? Would we in like have you seen that movie The Road?
The Road.
Where they've got Cormac McCarthy book where they got people in the basement and they're eating the people?
I don't know if we'll go to cannibalism. Maybe. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think we're going to have massive starvation. But a lot of Americans are overweight. So even if they were, quote, starving, they have a lot of adipose tissue to survive it. So I mean, but there are individuals that don't have that, and they could die off. I don't think we're going to die from starvation. We may starve, but I don't think that we're going to have lots of deaths from starvation. I'm more worried about death from COVID-19 and that sort of thing. But I don't see that as a realistic scenario where it's going to be cannibalism and mass starvation. I just don't see that.
Do you think there'll be looting though on the streets of America if there's a prolonged lockdown?
Yeah. If there's a prolonged lockdown and people start to run out of provisions, then there's going to be social, discontent, and there's going to be looting and there's going to be gunfire, and then it's Mad Max. It starts to get into Mad Max, but I don't think it's going to get so bad where it's going to be cannibalism and people are dropping dead because they don't have any food. But you're going to have, similar, there were the race riots in the 60s in the United States, it'll be something like that, where you may have a flare up and it's like 2 or 3 days, maybe even a week. And the police will be afraid to engage because it is so violent. But then it'll die down again. One, because people will not have enough energy to sustain it. Because if they don't have food, you need a lot of energy, right? So people don't realize that the military, these soldiers, they're eating like a 4,000 calorie diet. They're not, they're not on, these MREs, have a lot of calories, right? So if you're fighting, if you're creating a lot of havoc in the society, you got to have a sustained energy level, right? That's why if they're fighting because of lack of food, it will burn out because they won't have the energy to maintain the fight. So you might have a week, of massive riots, kind of thing. But it's not going to be door to door to door to door. You're going to have these pockets where, people will be looting stores that are closed. I think that's where most of it will happen. Because some of these stores that are closed, they'll have provisions and food in it that people can take. I'm seeing like LA as like an example. I don't know if New York would go down that road or not. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure. It could. But I don't see that as a realistic scenario where we're going to be eating each other and completely running out of food. But instead of eating 3 meals a day, you may be only eating 1 meal a day. I can see that. I think that's a very realistic possibility. If this is sustained and supply chains really are disrupted. But it's not to the point where we're going to die. But people will get sick because of nutrition, lack of nutrition. So that's another epidemiological variable. Right now, it's very small, as a very small factor in this big equation, right? But as nutrition goes down, the health problems start to increase because of that. They won't be able to fight the diseases in this society and this disease, this COVID-19 disease. So, it's possible that it adds to a whole new dynamic of the infection. But I just don't see it as a realist at this moment in time. I don't think that it's going to be massive starvation where it's like Ethiopia in the 80s. I just don't see that.
People have asked me if it's been brought to your attention that the coronavirus was patented, and I looked at that. It seemed pretty meaningless to me. It's COVID-19 is the problem, isn't it? Not coronavirus.
Well, they see here, people need to realize that companies need to patent certain things so they can have an incentive to get investors to create vaccines or therapeutics. So they may create something and patent it because that patent is important. That IP, intellectual property, is a key piece to a platform for the business. Okay, so it's not like they're patenting. It's not like they're patenting COVID-19. They're patenting something that is, that's related to of coronaviruses that helps with a certain therapeutic line. And if they didn't have that IP, then you wouldn't have biotech companies. You wouldn't have pharmaceutical companies. I mean, that's the main thing is the IP, right? So I don't even know when people say, well, it was patented, things are patented. Well, that's how biotechs work. It's just like, I don't know the rationale of what they're saying. Just because something's patented doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. I think their argument is that it was patented, so there must have been a cabal or a company that created the virus. No, that's not what that means. You got to read. See, this is the loss of context. People, their heart's in the right place, but they jump to conclusions too quickly, and they lose the context of what things mean. Yes, there are people that are against you, Yes, people are trying to control you. There are people that are trying to erode the civil liberties because they gain power in a new world order or a new construct of government, right? That's all logical. And that's been happening for a long time. But people get into the weeds of the detail and are extrapolating things that don't exist. Just because a company has a patent to build a business doesn't mean that they're part of this gigantic cabal. But it doesn't mean that the cabal doesn't exist. The cabal does exist. It's just that there's too many, so if they're looking at all the dots, they think all the dots connect. No, not all the dots connect. There's many that connect, but not all dots connect. And there's the problem, is that they get a piece of information and they try to plug it into their particular paradigm. And they'll shave off a little bit of truth here, shave off a little bit of reality there, and then they plug it into their paradigm. But to me, I've seen a lot of patents, and I personally don't see the connection. I see the financial incentive, to build a vaccine. They may have been privy to information that through the grapevine that there may be virus that pops up. They may have been told that it would be zoonotic. They may have thought that, there's lots of SARS incidences that have been taking place the last 15 years. It may behoove them to actually study for vaccines for a SARS program. That doesn't mean that they were part of the cabal that leaked the P4 bioengineered virus. See, you can't make that link. They saw SARS as a problem, MERS as a problem. Let's try to do a vaccine, and let's get an IP to develop that therapeutic. There is no connection between the IP and P4. But people will make that connection because they want to make all dots connect. And not all dots connect. They don't need that, But that doesn't mean that we don't have a new world order. We do have a new world order that needs to be fought, so we don't lose our civil liberties. Because I'm more, nationhood, more, countries need to be countries. We don't need a one world government. We need to work together. That doesn't mean you have a one world government.
So people watching this, I would urge you to go in the description box below this video. There's a link there to Dr. Cottrell's YouTube channel. He's posting videos constantly on this. On my to watch list, he's got a video where he's done an interview with Dr. John Campbell. I'm going to be very interested to watch that because I've been watching his stuff as well. So please go down and subscribe and watch Paul's videos. And is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the people watching this, Paul?
Like I've been saying on pretty much every channel, we have to use the scientific method. We have to use logic. We have to help each other and realize that if we work together, we can get through this. And we minimize, the biological damage that's taking place, the economic damage, and also the damage to our civil liberties. We got to be very cognizant that we have to be engaged citizens to protect our civil liberties. And I think that is losing our civil liberties. It's far worse than the disease, and everyone's worried about the disease and catching it. Well, it's a problem and it could kill you, but I'd rather take my chances with COVID-19 than my chances with the globalists trying to give me forced vaccinations and a chip and, yada, 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 So, and people just need to get engaged. And I'm concerned that they're not engaged enough to tell these governments no and hell no.
So if you've enjoyed this video, please put your questions and comments in the comment section below on YouTube. And huge thank you to all people who've subscribed, almost at 400,000 subscribers right now. Subscription logo's bottom right hand corner. And huge thank you to people who've donated on PayPal, Patreon, just giving those links in the description box as well. Thanks very much again for your time, Paul. Will be interesting perhaps to revisit this when things are peaking, when the wave is peaking. in America and New York, and it seems like you're in the epicenter there of New York right now. So I hope things go okay in the coming days.
I hope so. But thank you very much for having me on your show.
Cheers from London. Thank you.